Welcome to Journey to Daybreak. I'm Rita Golden. Today, we continue to reflect on the cycle of unforgiveness. Have you ever been caught in a cycle of unforgiveness? This is a powerful story of forgiveness from South Africa, as told by Sky Jethani. Desmond Tutu is a bishop in South Africa who won the Nobel Peace Prize for his work against apartheid. In his book, No Future Without Forgiveness, he shares stories and insights from his leadership role in South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. South Africa had been plagued for generations by terrible violence between the white ruling minority and the black majority. Once the whites relinquished power and Nelson Mandela became president, the question, in need of an answer, was clear. How does a country with so much pain and violence and division in its past move forward? Tutu and others established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as a way forward. The goal for those who had committed atrocities in the past to come forward and tell the truth, both blacks and whites. But it didn't end there. While confessing the truth, the goal was to bring reconciliation and forgiveness to break the cycle of hate so the whole country could move forward. In one chapter of the book, Tutu recounts testimony after testimony of people, both black and white, who came before the commission to confess torturing and murdering others. It was horrific, terrible stories in graphic detail. It's almost impossible to believe that human beings are capable of such evil. The horrors of the crimes make one particular story especially moving. Two people who came before the commission were Mrs. Carlotta and her daughter. Mrs. Carlotta's husband had been an advocate for black South African rural communities. Because of his work, he'd been arrested, detained, and tortured by the police numerous times. But one day, he disappeared. On the front page of the newspaper, Mrs. Carlotta saw a photograph of her husband's car on fire. She cried so loudly during the hearing, describing the autopsy's report about his torture, that the commission had to be adjourned. When they reconvened, Mrs. Carlotta's daughter testified. Years had gone by, and she was now a young lady. She pleaded with the commission to discover who had killed her father, but she was not crying out because she wanted vengeance or justice. Instead, she said to the commission, "We want to forgive, but we don't know whom to forgive." Eventually, members of the commission, the police, confessed to the crime. Rather than continue the endless cycle of hatred, Mrs. Carlotta and her daughter forgave the men who tortured and killed their husband and father, because that is what Christ's people do. And now, the Reverend Dr. Martha Toney continues with more insights on breaking the cycle of unforgiveness. Dr. Toney.
Greetings, this is Dr. Martha Toney. Last week, we began a discussion about holding on to old hurts and the tremendous effects of unforgiveness that can happen in our relationships, and it can also affect our health and our well-being. You may be thinking that you are free from such inner conflicts and that you are well beyond the thought of holding grudges or bearing resentments towards past hurts. If that's true, then we rejoice with you. But if deep down you truly do not feel at ease in your soul over some past or present hurt, I trust that today's program will continue to support you in finding a new pattern and a new path for going forward in your life instead of going round and round in a cycle of pain. So to begin, here are a few questions that may help you assess your present health in the area of forgiveness. Do you find yourself ruminating over and over in emotions of anger, aggressive behavior, apathy, That means generally not feeling like entering into life, avoiding seeing certain people, always counting up how a person has offended you or let you down. If these are some of your emotions in present play, chances are you are wrestling with old hurts and pains. Is it possible that the person you hold these emotions towards is not even aware of how you feel because you have learned the great skill of making yourself unavailable to them? The skill set of avoidance towards those who hurt us can be one of the most hurtful traps that binds us, not only you, but the person whom you have consciously or unconsciously learned to avoid. If these are some of your emotions in present play, chances are you are wrestling with old hurts and pains. It is possible that the person you hold these emotions towards is not even aware of how you feel because you've learned that great skill of making yourself unavailable to them. The skill set of avoidance towards those who hurt us can be one of the most hurtful traps that binds not only you, but the person whom you have consciously or unconsciously learned to avoid. Some psychologists would call this giving other people the silent treatment. This is an extremely painful piece of weaponry that can be very harmful to ourselves and to others. Everett Worthington describes unforgiveness as an emotion served cold or delayed because it develops over time as we meditate on those feelings of resentment and bitterness. End of quote. The idea is not to let hurts fester. Matthew 18:15 says, "If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault, between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother." If reconciliation is not possible, then Scripture prescribes the next step. But the point is that the sooner the better, because it is time that will turn a hurt and pain into a deeply ingrained cycle of offense that every day will get harder and harder to overcome. It's like carrying around a red-hot rock that you can't lay down, and it's burning you and not the other person. It's highly important to make the distinction between those little annoyances of personal mistakes that are easy to forgive and those more emotionally cutting pains that cause you to no longer feel the same way you once felt about the person. This definition of emotional forgiveness would mean that we would eventually be able to let go completely of an offense, let go of all the hurt and pain, and be able to inwardly get back to the place we were before the offense happened. Again, with this kind of forgiveness, we would be able to reignite for the other person feelings of empathy and compassion and love. I would like to share a personal experience that I encountered a few years back. This illustrates the need for immediate forgiveness. Let's call my friend BR. My friend BR was really angry with me. So many times I endeavored to find out what I did. I didn't know what I did. She was a dear person to me, and I did everything within my power to reconcile and retain the feelings that I'd always shared with her, but nothing worked. Worse still, she employed that awful thing called the silent treatment technique, which meant that eventually she would not even speak. She wouldn't answer a call. She would have no contact with me. So for many months I carried a feeling of hurt and pain inside. I could not believe anyone, especially a Christian, would not want to reconcile. But recently, and by pure accident, I found an article about my friend where she had been diagnosed in 2017 with early onset Alzheimer's disease. It was 3 years after deep sadness that I had carried around inside before I found the real truth about what was going on. My friend was not able to make good choices, and I didn't even know it. And I have a point for wanting to share this story with you, because it is my hope that you'll be able to see how she and I both suffered for a reason that had nothing whatsoever to do with any offense. She suffered and I suffered because she was ill physically. I suffered because I didn't know she was ill. And my heart finally after hearing this news, was able to let go of all those feelings of hurt. But what if there is a way for us to choose that exact path without all those wasted years? Even if, unlike my situation, someone deliberately crushes us, is there a way out without carrying the red-hot rock around? I believe there is. Here's a very important point. Not all offenses are ones that we can forget, although we may be able to forgive. There are some relationships that we will rebuild, and that is called reconciliation. But it requires more than just ourselves. It requires at least two people. You can forgive another person whether they forgive you or not. Forgiveness lies strictly within your own power. And reconciliation requires more than just you. It requires a deep desire to rebuild, restore, and reclaim a relationship to the order it was before the offense. There may be times in your life that you feel that the relationship has a finality and a closure. It just may be over. It may not be wise to keep that relationship in your life. However, forgiveness is still totally possible on your end or on the other. But if you find that you have more peace in your heart without the person remaining in your life, it really is perfectly fine to let it go as long as in your heart you can experience a genuine compassion and concern for the other person. In closing, I would like to just say from my own experience, the most important thing for you and me as Christians is that in our hearts there's no revenge, resentment, or anger. Forgiveness is a process. If we just go around throwing people away and sitting on our anger, we just simply will not be able to find a new path, a new pattern. This experience is put in our lives for spiritual growth. And if we fail to extract growth from that process, we'll have missed the whole purpose of the experience. To summarize this, if you're no longer going around and round in circles, you're entering a new era that will be the entrance to a path that you've never taken before. Forgiveness is a decision. It's a decision for letting go of pain and exiting the ramp out of a destructive cycle of hurt. If you feel you just can't do it, you're probably right. We can't do things by ourselves. Usually we need God. But don't get hung up on the thought that you have to feel like you have forgiven. You may still feel pain, but you can say to God, and this has helped me so many times, God, I'm willing for you to teach me how to forgive. I don't feel like it right now, but I am willing to learn this if you will help me. If you will pray that God will just teach you this way of forgiveness and reconciliation, I promise you it will happen. You can find my book at Amazon.com, Journey to Daybreak, 40 Days from Darkness to Light. I think you'll find it helpful. And you can write us also at Martha Tony, P.O. Box 160053, Boiling Springs, South Carolina, 29316. You can also go to my webpage, www.marthatony.com. And you can write me at Outlook.com, martha.tony@outlook.com. This is Dr. Martha Tony saying thank you for joining us today on Journey to Daybreak. And until next time, keep walking in the light.